I never imagined that buying a skid steer for my landscaping business would turn into a nightmare involving stalking, breaking and entering, and eventually criminal charges against the president of my homeowners association. My name is Trevor Whitmore, and I run a small landscaping company in Gilbert, Arizona. I had saved up for months to purchase a used Bobcat S570 skid steer, a compact machine that would revolutionize my ability to take on bigger jobs. The machine cost me $18,000, which represented nearly everything I had managed to put away over 2 years of grinding it out in the Arizona heat. When it finally arrived on that Tuesday morning in March, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. The bright white machine gleamed in the sunlight as the delivery truck lowered it onto my driveway. I lived in a development called Saga Heights, one of those master-planned communities with strict rules about everything from mailbox colors to the height of your grass. Our HOA was run by a woman named Brenda Patterson, a 52-year-old woman with short blonde hair that she kept in that classic Karen cut, the kind that seemed to defy gravity in the back. Brenda had been HOA president for 6 years, and she ruled the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. The skid steer sat on my driveway for maybe 3 hours before Brenda showed up at my door. I was inside having lunch when I heard the aggressive knocking. When I opened the door, she was standing there with her arms crossed, wearing white capri pants and a floral print shirt that seemed about 2 sizes too small. "Trevor, what is that monstrosity on your driveway?" she demanded without even saying hello. "It's a skid steer," I said. "I just bought it for my business." "I can see what it is," Brenda snapped. "What I want to know is why it's parked in front of your house in clear violation of our HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions." I took a deep breath. I had actually read through the HOA rules before purchasing the machine. Section 12.4 says commercial vehicles can't be parked on the street or visible from the street for extended periods. I'm moving it to my backyard storage area this afternoon. It's only been here for a few hours. Brenda's face reddened. "That thing is an eyesore. It needs to be removed from this community immediately." "It will be in my backyard behind a 6-foot fence by tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "That's allowed under the rules." She pointed a finger at me. "I'll be watching to make sure it's moved, and if I see it out front again, you'll be getting a fine." With that, she turned and marched back to her white Lexus SUV. I watched her drive away, already feeling a headache forming. Brenda had a reputation in the neighborhood for being difficult, but I had mostly avoided her wrath until now. True to my word, I spent that afternoon building a proper storage area in my backyard. My property was a corner lot with a decent-sized backyard, and I had already installed a sturdy 6-foot privacy fence the previous year. I created a graveled pad in the back corner and parked the skid steer there. From the street, you couldn't see it at all. I even put a tarp over it to protect it from the elements. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA. I opened it to find a formal complaint and a $500 fine for storing commercial equipment in a residential area. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The equipment wasn't visible from the street, and I had checked the rules thoroughly. I called the number listed on the letter and got Brenda's voicemail. "This is Trevor Whitmore at 4782 East Juniper Lane," I said after the beep. "I received a fine that I believe is incorrect. My skid steer is stored in my backyard according to the rules. Please call me back so we can discuss this." She never called back. Instead, 3 days later, I got another letter informing me that my appeal had been denied, and the fine had been increased to $750 due to continued violation. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which was held on a Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. About 20 other residents were there, sitting in folding chairs facing a table where Brenda sat with 3 other board members. I recognized Doug Henderson, the treasurer, and 2 other people I had seen around the neighborhood but never spoken to. When the meeting opened for homeowner concerns, I raised my hand. Brenda looked directly at me and said, "Yes, Trevor." I stood up. "I'm here about the fine I received for my skid steer. The equipment is stored in my backyard behind a privacy fence. It's not visible from the street. I believe the fine is unjustified." Brenda shuffled some papers in front of her. "The equipment is still on the property. That's the violation. But the CCRs say equipment can't be visible from the street or common areas," I said. "Mine isn't visible." "It says commercial vehicles and equipment should not be stored in the community," Brenda countered. "No, it doesn't," I said. I pulled out my copy of the rules and read the exact language. Section 12.4 states, and I quote, "Commercial vehicles and equipment may not be parked on streets or driveways where visible from the street or common areas for more than 24 hours. My equipment is in my backyard." Several other residents nodded in agreement. One older man in the back said, "That sounds right to me." Brenda's face turned red again. "The spirit of the rule is clear. We don't want this community looking like a construction yard." "The spirit doesn't matter," I said. "The actual written rules matter. I'm following them." "Your appeal is denied," Brenda said firmly. "Next item." "You can't just make up rules," I protested. "Sit down, Trevor, or I'll have you removed from this meeting," Brenda said. I sat down, fuming. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to me and quietly expressed their support. One woman named Patricia told me that Brenda had been trying to fine her for months over a bird feeder that she claimed was too decorative. Another guy named Mike said Brenda had sent him threatening letters about his lawn being a quarter-inch too tall. I decided to consult with a lawyer. I met with an attorney named Robert Chen who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing my case, he agreed that the fine was baseless. "You're clearly in compliance with your CCRs," Robert said. "I can send them a letter on your behalf making it clear that you won't be paying this fine and that any attempt to place a lien on your property will result in legal action." "How much will that cost?" I asked. "For a letter, $300, he said. I agreed, and Robert sent the letter the following week. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. So very wrong. The next Saturday morning, I was inside making breakfast when I heard a noise from my backyard. I looked out the kitchen window and nearly dropped my coffee mug. Brenda Patterson was in my backyard, walking around my skid steer and taking pictures with her phone. I ran outside. "Brenda, what the hell are you doing in my backyard?" She jumped, clearly not expecting me to catch her. "I'm documenting HOA violations," she said, recovering her composure. "You're trespassing," I said. "Get out of my yard right now." "This is HOA business," she said indignantly. "This is my private property and you're trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the police." She glared at me but walked toward my side gate. "You haven't heard the last of this," she said as she left. I immediately went back inside and called the Gilbert Police Department's non-emergency line. I explained what had happened and that I wanted to file a trespassing report. An officer arrived about 40 minutes later. Officer Martinez was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, with a professional demeanor. He took down all the information and asked if I wanted to press charges. "I want it documented," I said. "If she does it again, then yes, I want to press charges." "Understood," Officer Martinez said. "I'll go speak with her and give her a warning." After he left, I went to Home Depot and bought 2 wireless security cameras. I installed them that afternoon, positioning them to cover my backyard and the side gates. The cameras connected to my phone and would send me alerts if they detected motion. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I continued running my landscaping business, using the skid steer on various jobs around the Phoenix area. The machine was worth every penny. It allowed me to complete grading work, move heavy materials, and take on projects I never could have done before. Then one morning in early April, at around 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my backyard camera. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live feed. There was Brenda Patterson, once again in my backyard, this time trying to put some kind of notice on my skid steer. I threw on clothes and ran outside. She was so focused on what she was doing that she didn't hear me approach. "Brenda, this is the second time you've trespassed on my property," I said loudly. She spun around, holding what looked like a bright orange violation sticker. "This equipment is a nuisance and needs to be removed. Get off my property right now," I said. "The police already warned you about this. I'm performing my duties as HOA president," she said. I pulled out my phone. "Then you can explain that to the police." I dialed 911 this time since she was actively on my property. Brenda's eyes widened. "You're overreacting." "You were warned," I said. "Leave now." She hurried toward the gate, but I kept her on camera until she left. When the police arrived this time, it was Officer Martinez again, along with another officer. "Mr. Whitmore," Officer Martinez said with a knowing look. "Same situation." "Second time," I said. "I have video of both incidents." I showed him the footage from both cameras. The officers went to Brenda's house, which was only 4 streets over from mine. When they came back about an hour later, Officer Martinez told me she had been cited for criminal trespassing. "She insisted she has the right to inspect properties as HOA president," Officer Martinez said. "I explained that she doesn't have the right to enter private backyards without permission. She's been formally cited. If it happens again, she'll be arrested." "Thank you," I said. Over the next few days, I received a barrage of emails from Brenda through the HOA email system. They were all thinly veiled threats about fines, liens, and legal action. I forwarded them all to Robert Chen, my attorney. Robert called me after reviewing them. "This is harassment," he said. "I'm going to send another letter demanding that all communication go through me. Also, you might want to consider requesting a restraining order if this continues." "Let's see if the citation stops her first," I said. It didn't. A week later, another motion alert at 5:30 in the morning. I pulled up the camera feed and couldn't believe my eyes. Brenda was back in my yard, this time with a clipboard, apparently doing some kind of inspection. I called 911 immediately while watching her on camera. I didn't even go outside this time. I just waited for the police to arrive while recording everything. 2 patrol cars showed up within 10 minutes. I met the officers at my front door and showed them the live camera feed. They could see Brenda still in my backyard. "That's the third time," Officer Martinez said, shaking his head. "Does your side gate lock?" "It has a latch, but no lock," I said. "You might want to add a padlock," he suggested. The officers went around to my backyard and confronted Brenda. I watched from my kitchen window as they spoke with her. Even from a distance, I could see her animated gestures and red face. After about 15 minutes, the officers walked her around to the front, where a patrol car was waiting. Officer Martinez came to my door. "She's being arrested for criminal trespassing," he said. "This is her 3rd offense after being warned and cited. You'll need to come down to the station later to give a formal statement." I watched as they put Brenda into the back of the patrol car. Several neighbors had come out of their houses to see what was happening. I saw curtains moving in windows up and down the street. That afternoon, I went to the police station and gave my statement. The detective handling the case, Detective Sarah Morrison, asked me about the history with the HOA situation. "This seems like it's about more than just inspections," Detective Morrison said. "What's the underlying conflict?" I explained the whole situation about the skid steer, the baseless fines, and Brenda's insistence that I remove it from my property despite being in compliance with the rules. "Has she ever expressed interest in the equipment itself?" Detective Morrison asked. "Not really," I said. "She just wants it gone." "We'll be in touch if we need anything else," Detective Morrison said. Brenda was released on bail that evening. The following day, I received an email from Doug Henderson, the HOA treasurer, informing me that the board had held an emergency meeting and suspended Brenda from her duties, pending an investigation. He also said that the fines against me were being reviewed by the board. I thought maybe, finally, this nightmare was over. The criminal case against Brenda was moving forward. She was suspended from the HOA, and I could go back to running my business in peace. Then things got really weird. 3 days after her arrest, I got a knock on my door around 2 in the afternoon. I opened it to find Brenda standing there, but she looked completely different. She was smiling, almost artificially so, and holding what looked like a homemade pie. "Trevor," she said in a sweet voice that was completely at odds with every previous interaction we had had. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I've been under so much stress, and I took it out on you unfairly. I brought you this pie as a peace offering." I stared at her, completely confused. "Brenda, you're facing criminal charges. You shouldn't be here." I know," she said, her smile never wavering. "But I've been doing a lot of thinking. You know, that's a really nice skid steer you have. I've been looking into getting one for some projects around my property." And there it was, the real reason for her visit. "What kind of projects?" I asked cautiously. "Oh, you know, landscaping, moving some rocks, that sort of thing," she said. "I was thinking, since you're not using it every day, maybe we could work out an arrangement where I could borrow it sometimes." "Borrow it," I said. "You mean rent it?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, I was thinking more like a neighborhood sharing situation. We are part of the same community, after all. Brenda, you've been harassing me for weeks, trespassed on my property 3 times and got arrested. Now you want to borrow my $18,000 piece of equipment. When you put it that way, it sounds bad," she said. "But I'm trying to make amends. If you let me use the skid steer sometimes, I'll make sure all those fines disappear." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you trying to bribe me?" "It's not a bribe," she said quickly. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "No," I said firmly. "The answer is no, and you need to leave my property." Her smile disappeared completely. "You're making a mistake, Trevor." "Goodbye, Brenda," I said and closed the door. I immediately called Robert Chen and told him about the conversation. He was astounded. "She tried to condition dropping the fines on you letting her use your equipment," he said. "That could be considered extortion. Did you record the conversation?" "No, I didn't think to," I said. "If she contacts you again, record it," Robert said. "In Arizona, you only need one-party consent for recordings, so you can legally record conversations you're part of." "Got it," I said. The next day, Brenda sent me a text message. It read, "Trevor, I really need to use that skid steer for a project. What would it cost to rent it for a week?" I showed the text to Robert, who advised me to ignore it. But Brenda kept texting. Over the next 3 days, she sent me 15 messages, each one more insistent than the last. They progressed from asking nicely to offering money, to finally saying that she deserved to use it because of all the work she did for the community. Her final message was, "I'm the HOA president. That equipment shouldn't even be allowed in this community." You should be grateful I'm offering to pay you anything for it. I forwarded all the messages to Robert and Detective Morrison. The detective called me that evening. "Mr. Whitmore, I want you to consider installing locks on all your gates," she said. "Mrs. Patterson seems fixated on your equipment, and given her history of trespassing, I'm concerned she might try something else." I took her advice seriously. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought heavy-duty padlocks and hasps for both side gates. I also installed a lock on the back gate that led to the alley behind my property. Beyond that, I added a chain and lock to the skid steer itself, securing it to a ground anchor I had installed in the concrete pad. For about a week, everything was quiet. Brenda's criminal court date was scheduled for early May, about 3 weeks away. I was focused on work and trying to put the whole situation behind me. Then came the fourth break-in. It happened on a Tuesday night around 11. I was already in bed when my phone exploded with alerts from multiple cameras. I grabbed it and saw the live feed from my backyard camera. Someone was at my back gate with what looked like bolt cutters, working on the padlock. I called 911 immediately while pulling on clothes. "Someone is breaking into my backyard right now," I told the dispatcher. "I have video of them cutting my lock." I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet to get a better view while staying on the phone with the dispatcher. The person was wearing dark clothes and a hoodie, but when they turned toward the camera for a moment, the motion-activated light on my back porch illuminated their face. It was Brenda Patterson. "I can see who it is," I told the dispatcher. "It's my neighbor, Brenda Patterson. She's the one who was arrested for trespassing before. She's cutting through my lock." "Officers are on the way," the dispatcher said. "Stay inside the house. Do not confront her." I watched on the camera as Brenda successfully cut through the padlock and entered my backyard. She went straight to the skid steer and examined the chain securing it. She had brought bolt cutters, but the chain I had used was thick marine-grade steel. I watched her struggle with it for a few minutes. Then police sirens became audible in the distance. Brenda's head snapped up. She looked around frantically, then ran toward the back gate. But it was too late. Officers were already coming around both sides of my house. I went to my front door and saw 3 patrol cars in front of my house. Officer Martinez was there again, along with several other officers. He saw me and nodded. "She's in the backyard trying to escape through the back gate," I said. 2 officers went around the back while Officer Martinez stayed with me. We could hear shouting from the backyard, and then the officers appeared, walking Brenda between them. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She was screaming about how she had a right to inspect HOA property. "That's my equipment," she yelled as they walked her past my house. "The HOA should have control of it." Detective Morrison arrived about 20 minutes later. She took my statement and reviewed all the camera footage. The video clearly showed Brenda cutting the lock and entering the property. "This is now breaking and entering, destruction of property and attempted theft," Detective Morrison said. "Combined with the previous trespassing charges and violations of the court order to stay away from your property, she's looking at serious charges." "There was a court order?" I asked. "Yes. After her last arrest, she was given a stay-away order as a condition of her bail," Detective Morrison explained. "She's violated that. She won't be getting bail this time." The next morning, my phone rang early. It was Doug Henderson from the HOA board. "Trevor, I just heard about last night," he said. "On behalf of the board, I want to apologize. Brenda's behavior has been completely unacceptable. The board voted this morning to immediately remove her as president and revoke her board position entirely. We're also formally dropping all fines against you and issuing a written apology." I appreciate that, I said. We're also looking into whether the HOA might be liable for her actions, Doug continued. Our attorney is reviewing everything. We may need to reach out to you about a settlement to cover your legal fees and damages. I'll have my attorney contact you, I said. Over the next few days, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. I found out from neighbors that Brenda had apparently been planning to start her own landscaping business and had become obsessed with my skid steer. Several people told me she had been talking about how unfair it was that I had such expensive equipment when she couldn't afford to buy her own. One neighbor, Patricia, told me something chilling. Brenda stopped by my house a few days before she broke in, Patricia said. She was asking about your schedule when you were usually home when you weren't. I thought it was strange, but I didn't realize what she was planning. The preliminary hearing for Brenda's criminal case was held in late May. I attended along with Detective Morrison. Brenda appeared with a public defender, looking haggard and defeated. She was still in custody, having been denied bail after the fourth break-in. The charges were read: 3 counts of criminal trespassing, 1 count of breaking and entering, 1 count of destruction of property, 1 count of attempted theft, and 1 count of violating a court order. The prosecutor laid out the entire timeline, including the text messages where Brenda had tried to get access to the skid steer. Brenda's attorney tried to argue that she had been under severe mental stress and wasn't thinking clearly, but the prosecutor pointed out the premeditated nature of the break-in. She had brought tools specifically to cut locks. She had surveilled my schedule. This wasn't a snap decision. The judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial and kept Brenda in custody. The trial was scheduled for August. In the meantime, life started returning to normal. The new HOA board, now led by a reasonable woman named Jennifer Flores, sent me a formal letter of apology and a check for $3,000 to cover my legal fees, the damaged locks, and the harassment I had endured. They also updated the HOA rules to be clearer about equipment storage and to include specific provisions preventing board members from entering private property without permission. My landscaping business was thriving. The skid steer had allowed me to triple my revenue, and I was hiring my first employee, a young guy named Marcus who had just graduated from trade school. But the saga with Brenda wasn't quite over yet, because, incredibly, there was a 5th break-in. This happened in mid-June, which shocked everyone because Brenda was supposed to be in jail. I was at a job site in Scottsdale when my phone started buzzing with camera alerts. I pulled up the feed and saw someone in dark clothes at my back gate again. My heart sank. I called 911 and then called Detective Morrison directly. "Someone's breaking into my backyard again," I said. "But Brenda's in jail, so I don't know who it is." "I'm on my way," Detective Morrison said. I left the job site and drove as fast as I legally could back to Gilbert. When I arrived, there were already 4 patrol cars at my house. Detective Morrison was in my backyard with another person in handcuffs. It was a woman I didn't recognize, probably in her mid-30s with long brown hair. She was crying and trying to explain something to the detective. Detective Morrison came over to me. "Do you know this woman?" "I've never seen her before," I said. The detective shook her head in disbelief. "This is Sharon Montgomery, Brenda Patterson's sister. Apparently, Brenda convinced her to come finish what she started." My jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," Detective Morrison said. "Sharon is claiming that Brenda told her the skid steer actually belonged to the HOA and that you had stolen it. She was trying to take it on her sister's behalf." Sharon was still crying. "She said it was legally the HOA's property and that she just needed help retrieving it. I didn't know I was breaking the law." Your sister is in jail for doing this exact thing 4 times, Detective Morrison said to Sharon. You didn't think that was a red flag? Sharon had no good answer for that. She was arrested for attempted theft and breaking and entering. The incident prompted the prosecutor to add additional charges against Brenda for conspiracy and solicitation to commit theft. It also meant that her bail, if she ever got out before trial, would be astronomical. I had to install new locks again. I also upgraded my camera system and added motion sensor lights all around my property. My neighbors were incredibly supportive. Mike from down the street organized a neighborhood watch specifically for my property, with people volunteering to keep an eye out, especially at night. The case became somewhat famous in Gilbert. Local news picked up on the story of the HOA president who couldn't stop breaking into a resident's property to try to steal his skid steer. I declined interview requests, but the court records were public, and reporters had a field day with the story. The trial finally began in mid-August. It was held at the Maricopa County Superior Court in downtown Phoenix. I took time off from work to attend each day. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. Security camera footage from all 4 of Brenda's break-ins, her text messages demanding use of the equipment, testimony from Officer Martinez and Detective Morrison, and the bolt cutters that Brenda had used. Brenda's defense attorney tried to argue that her actions were the result of a mental health crisis brought on by the stress of managing the HOA. They brought in a psychologist who testified that Brenda had been suffering from anxiety and depression, but the prosecutor destroyed that argument. She showed that Brenda's actions were calculated and premeditated. She had researched the value of skid steers. She had asked neighbors about my schedule. She had purchased bolt cutters specifically for cutting locks. She had even tried to recruit her sister to finish the job while she was in jail. This wasn't someone having a mental break. This was someone who had become obsessed with taking something that didn't belong to her. The most dramatic moment came when I testified. The prosecutor had me walk through the entire timeline, from buying the skid steer to each break-in. Then Brenda's attorney cross-examined me. Mr. Whitmore, isn't it true that your skid steer is quite loud and disruptive? She asked. I keep it in my backyard, I said. I rarely run it on my property. I transport it to job sites. But it's a large piece of industrial equipment in a residential neighborhood, she pressed. It's stored in compliance with all HOA rules, I said, and it's no different than someone having a work truck or trailer. My client believed she was protecting the community's property values, the attorney said. Your client broke into my property 5 times if you count the one her sister attempted on her behalf, I said, my frustration finally showing. She tried to steal an $18,000 piece of equipment. She harassed me, filed false complaints, and made my life hell for months. This wasn't about property values. This was about her wanting my equipment and being angry that she couldn't have it. The judge sustained an objection before I could continue, but I think the jury got the message. The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, Brenda was found guilty on all counts. 3 counts of criminal trespassing, 1 count of breaking and entering, 1 count of attempted theft, 1 count of destruction of property, 1 count of violating a court order, and 2 counts related to conspiring with her sister. Sentencing was scheduled for September. In the meantime, Brenda remained in custody. Sharon Montgomery, Brenda's sister, took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to attempted breaking and entering in exchange for probation and community service. She also had to testify against Brenda, confirming that Brenda had knowingly asked her to break into my property and take the skid steer. The sentencing hearing was on a Tuesday morning in September. The courtroom was packed with people from Sagaro Heights. Many of them were there to testify about how Brenda had harassed them over the years with baseless fines and ridiculous complaints. The judge heard from several neighbors. Patricia talked about being threatened with fines over a bird feeder. Mike described being cited for grass that was supposedly too tall when it was actually within the regulations. An elderly couple named the Johnsons described how Brenda had tried to fine them for having a ramp installed for the husband's wheelchair, claiming it was an unauthorized modification. The picture that emerged was of someone who had abused her position as HOA president for years, wielding the rules like a weapon against anyone she didn't like. My situation with the skid steer was just the most extreme example. I also gave a victim impact statement. I described the stress and anxiety of constantly worrying about my property being invaded. I talked about the expense of installing multiple security systems and locks, and the cost of my legal fees. I mentioned how it had affected my business, with me constantly worried about my equipment instead of focusing on my work. When it was Brenda's turn to speak, she stood up and gave what seemed like a rehearsed apology. "I'm sorry for my actions," she said flatly. "I was under a lot of stress and made poor decisions." The judge was not impressed. Judge Richard Hamilton was a no-nonsense man in his early 60s who had clearly seen his share of cases. He looked at Brenda sternly. "Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community," Judge Hamilton said. "You were supposed to serve your neighbors, not terrorize them. The evidence shows that you engaged in a pattern of harassment and abuse that culminated in multiple criminal acts. You violated court orders. You recruited your own sister to commit crimes on your behalf. You showed no respect for the law, for your neighbor's property rights, or for the authority of this court." He sentenced her to 4 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 2 years. She was also ordered to pay restitution to me for all my expenses, which totaled over $8,000 including legal fees, security equipment, damaged locks, and lost work time. Brenda's face went white. Her attorney started to object, but the judge cut her off. "This sentence reflects the serious and repeated nature of your crimes," Judge Hamilton continued. "You had multiple opportunities to stop this behavior, and you chose to escalate instead. Perhaps time in prison will give you the opportunity to reflect on why respecting other people's property and rights is important." Brenda was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, crying. Her sister Sharon was sitting in the back of the courtroom, also crying. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Outside the courthouse, several neighbors came up to thank me. Patricia hugged me and said, "You did what a lot of us wish we'd had the courage to do. You stood up to her." Doug Henderson, still serving as the HOA treasurer, shook my hand. "The board wants you to know that we've implemented new policies to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. And we're considering filing a civil suit against Brenda to recover costs the HOA incurred because of her actions." Detective Morrison also approached me. "I've been a detective for 12 years, she said. "This is one of the strangest cases I've ever worked. Most criminals try to avoid getting caught. She just kept coming back." "Obsession makes people do crazy things," I said. "That it does," she agreed. Over the following weeks, life finally, truly returned to normal. My landscaping business continued to grow. I hired 2 more employees and bought a second, larger skid steer for bigger commercial jobs. I kept the original Bobcat, though, the one that had started this whole mess. It felt like a symbol of perseverance. The new HOA board under Jennifer Flores was night and day compared to Brenda's regime. They actually enforced the rules fairly and worked with residents instead of against them. They organized neighborhood events and created a community garden. Property values in Saguaro Heights actually went up because people wanted to live in a community with reasonable HOA management. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Brenda's husband had divorced her while she was awaiting trial. He had moved out of the community and apparently wanted nothing to do with the situation. Sharon Montgomery had completed her community service and was trying to rebuild her life. She had written me a letter apologizing for her role in the break-in, saying she had been manipulated by her sister and deeply regretted her actions. I appreciated the apology, though I didn't respond to the letter. The restitution payments came slowly. Brenda was working some kind of prison job that paid pennies per hour, and her wages were being garnished to pay me back. I figured I would eventually get most of the money, though it might take years. One afternoon in November, I was working on a landscaping project at a new shopping center in Chandler when my phone rang. It was Robert Chen, my attorney. "Trevor, I wanted to give you an update," he said. "The HOA's insurance company has reached out about settling their liability for Brenda's actions while she was acting as HOA president. They're offering $20,000. $20,000, I said, surprised. "It's to cover your pain and suffering beyond just the direct expenses," Robert explained. "They want to avoid a lawsuit. I recommend taking it." "Will I have to sign something saying I can't sue the HOA?" I asked. "Yes, but honestly, the HOA has already done everything they can to make this right," Robert said. "This is really about the insurance company protecting themselves." I thought about it for a moment. The money would be nice, and the new HOA board really had been great. "Okay," I said. "I'll take it." The settlement was finalized in December. After Robert's fees, I cleared about $16,000. I used some of it to upgrade my truck and put the rest into savings for future business expansion. Christmas came, and the neighborhood looked beautiful. The HOA had organized a holiday lights contest, and participation was huge. People were actually enjoying being part of the community again. I put up lights on my house for the first time in years, and my skid steer, still sitting peacefully in my backyard, got a Santa hat placed on top of it. It became something of a neighborhood joke, and people would walk by to take pictures on Christmas Eve. I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee when Jennifer Flores, the new HOA president, walked by with her family. They stopped to wish me happy holidays. "You know, Trevor," Jennifer said, "in a weird way, this whole situation was the best thing that could have happened to this community. It forced us to examine our HOA practices and make real changes. We're a better neighborhood because of it." "I would have preferred not going through months of harassment and break-ins," I said with a laugh. "Of course," she said quickly. "But you stood your ground. You showed that HOA boards aren't dictatorships. They have to follow their own rules and respect homeowners' rights." "I just wanted to run my business and be left alone," I said. "Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone," she said. They continued their walk, and I sat there thinking about everything that had happened. It had been a nightmare at the time, but she was right in a way. The community was better now. People felt like they could enjoy their homes without fear of arbitrary fines or harassment. I went inside and looked at the framed copy of my final letter from the HOA, the one officially dropping all fines and apologizing for Brenda's conduct. I had hung it in my office as a reminder. Next to it was a photo of my skid steer on the day it was delivered, gleaming white in the Arizona sunshine. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the Arizona Department of Corrections. Brenda had been officially processed into the state prison system and was serving her sentence at the Perryville Women's Prison in Goodyear. The email confirmed that restitution payments would continue to be deducted from her prison wages and sent to me. I closed the email and went back to planning jobs for the new year. My business was booming, I had great employees, and I lived in a community that was actually enjoyable again. The skid steer that had caused so much trouble was making me good money and allowing me to build the life I wanted. In early January, I got a call from Detective Morrison. "I wanted to let you know that we're closing the case file," she said. "Brenda's appeal was denied, so the conviction is final. She'll be eligible for parole in about 18 months. Will I be notified if she's released?" I asked. "Yes, victims are notified of parole hearings and release dates," Detective Morrison assured me. "But honestly, with her record now and the nature of the crimes, I doubt she'll be granted early parole." "I hope you're right," I said. "For what it's worth, this case made an impact in our department," she said. "We've added training about HOA disputes and how they can escalate. Your situation is now used as a case study for officers." "Great. I'm famous for being stalked by an HOA president," I joked. She laughed. "Hey, at least you came out on top. Not every victim can say that." She was right. I had fought back, documented everything, involved the authorities, and ultimately prevailed. It hadn't been easy or fun, but I had protected my property and my rights. As winter turned to spring in 2026, I found myself reflecting on the whole experience during a lunch break at a job site. I was sitting in my truck, eating a sandwich and watching my crew work with the skid steer to grade an area for a new retention pond. Marcus, my first hire, was operating the machine with skill now. He had learned quickly and was becoming a valuable asset to the company. We had just landed a big contract with a property management company to maintain the landscaping for 6 commercial properties around the Phoenix area. My phone rang. It was Doug Henderson from the HOA. "Trevor, I wanted to let you know that we're dedicating the community newsletter this month to changes we've made over the past year," he said. "We're including a section about the importance of following our own rules and respecting homeowner rights. We're not mentioning Brenda by name or going into details, but we wanted your permission to reference the situation generally." "That's fine," I said. "If it helps other people understand their rights, I'm all for it." "Thanks," Doug said. "Also, and I know this is a long shot, but we're looking for new board members. Any chance you'd be interested?" I laughed. "After everything I went through, no thanks, but I appreciate the offer." "Can't blame a guy for trying," he said. "You'd bring a good perspective." After we hung up, I thought about his offer. In another life, maybe I would have considered it. But I was content being a regular homeowner who followed the rules, ran his business, and stayed out of HOA politics. The rest of the spring and summer passed uneventfully. My business continued to grow. I bought property in Mesa to build a proper equipment yard, getting the commercial equipment out of my residential backyard entirely. Not because I had to, but because it made more business sense. In August, almost exactly a year after Brenda's sentencing, I attended a neighborhood barbecue at the community park. It was the first time I had really socialized with neighbors since everything happened. People were welcoming and friendly. A few brought up the situation with Brenda, but mostly to express support and share their own stories of how much better the HOA had become. Patricia found me by the grill. "I never got to properly thank you," she said. "That bird feeder I was being harassed about, I kept it up, and you know what? Nobody cared, because that's how it should be, reasonable people enforcing reasonable rules." "I'm glad it worked out," I said. "We all are," she said. "You took on the neighborhood bully and won. That takes courage." I didn't feel particularly courageous. I had just been a guy trying to run a business and protect his property. But maybe that was what courage looked like in real life, standing up for yourself when it would be easier to give in. As the sun set over the Sonoran Desert that evening, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The nightmare was truly over. Justice had been served. My business was thriving. And I lived in a community where the rules were enforced fairly, and people could actually enjoy their homes. The skid steer that started it all. It was still working hard, making me money and helping me build the future I wanted. Sometimes I would look at it and shake my head at everything it had caused, but mostly I was just grateful. Grateful that I had stood my ground, grateful for good neighbors, grateful for a justice system that worked, and grateful that obsessed HOA presidents couldn't just take whatever they wanted. Life had returned to normal, but it was a better normal. A normal where I knew my rights, knew how to defend them, and knew that bullies, even ones with HOA authority behind them, couldn't win if you were willing to stand up to them. And that was worth more than any skid steer could ever cost.